All right, so longevity is the defining question of humanity. For me, it's really about freedom from disease. It's about my grandma keeping her mental faculties. It's about my grandpa keeping up with my sister on the dance floor. And I think this is the most important thing that we could work on. So society is actually not doing enough. How many people are actually thinking about this problem, thinking that this is the most important problem in the world? Right? It's not enough. We humans can achieve amazing things if only we can coordinate and understand that this is important. So this is the percentage of your taxes that go towards aging research. That is crazy. What if it was 1,000 times more, 7.5%? Or what if we stopped fucking around and we actually did a huge effort towards this and put maybe even, I don't know, up to half of our taxes towards this and made it a priority? But we have a huge problem with regulations and this hindering of innovation. There are millions of lives that are being lost. How many people do you have around you that want to live a healthy, long life? And how many people are dying waiting for innovation? There's an invisible graveyard of all the people that die because they didn't yet have access to a drug that could save them. 10,000 people per year in just the US die from cancer, even though the clinical trials are ongoing that could have saved them. There was a delay with HIV, with the HIV pandemic, with a drug in the US that was approved actually in Europe 7 years prior, and then the FDA came out and said, success. We approved this drug, we're saving 10,000 people's lives a year. Well, you just admitted you almost killed 100,000 people. There was a delay of 30 years for human insulin. People had to suffer side effects in the US with animal insulin for 30 years. And so on and so on. There's, of course, hundreds of millions of people suffering from age-related disease. And there is, we can do things much faster. We've seen with COVID-19, we can do warp speed. But where is warp speed for the Alzheimer's crisis and cardiovascular disease crisis, right? Aging itself is a crisis. And we should try to think about a better way, a faster way to do things. There's this type 1 and type 2 error, right? If you approve a drug that is beneficial, it's great. And if you approve a drug that is harmful, it's awful, right? The incentives for regulators are set up to punish any sort of false negative, right? But what about the false positives? The regulators are actually great people. It's just that the incentives are set up so that they just maximize the power of the agency and just slow things down. And there's this regulatory capture problem. Things are the will of the people is not always, you cannot, for example, try a medicine. You're sort of, this is kind of a paternalistic, monopolistic view in our society that we need to protect people from themselves, right? But because people say, well, people will die, right, if you don't protect them. Well, that same argument could be used to put the speed limit at 4 miles an hour, right? Because otherwise, people will die, right? There's this great video by Reason on YouTube. Another Reason, not our Reason. And so I think a lot of people think about reform, right? It's great. Let's try to, maybe 80% of our efforts should be on trying to reform the current paradigm and change the world's mind. But maybe as a hedge, let's try a regulatory sandbox. Let's try in one location things that are sort of sped up with maybe a certificatory approach, like this drug is 5-star medicine, this is a 1-star medicine, your choice. Just like it's your choice how you go on Everest, how prepared you are, right? It's not the government preventing you from taking a risk. So maybe the world will learn something from the sandbox, and we really need to come together. The will of the people, that it's gonna, if it's this for the people, by the people, it gains legitimacy. It needs to be bottom-up and decentralized. It cannot be a top-down sort of company controlling a new city. And this was also kind of really cool in this movie, the Dallas Buyers Club. It showed how you get legitimacy. Those people, the people who had HIV during the pandemic and the epidemic in the 90s, they came together, made a club, and were trying to solve this issue outside of the current regulations. And as a community, you get a lot of leverage. You can create a state, right? You can direct taxes, education, influence policy, and so on. It's really this idea that you can make a Manhattan Project, right, as a government. Well, maybe bottom up, like a DAO. We have seen DAOs like Vita DAO, which I'm a founding steward of, but it's kind of been online, right? And we cannot give people digital medicine. We need to create real medicine. We've shown that we can fund a lot of things. Like a lot of people are interested. We have 10,000 community members. We've funded over 19 projects. And one of them, for example, is ready to go into humans soon. And we realized there's a huge bottleneck there. So we can definitely do a lot more. We've seen this happen before. We've seen people create a city with the Manhattan Project, right? Los Alamos, to focus on one thing. And I'm not saying that everyone is going to move there, right? Not all physicists move there. Maybe, I think definitely most people will be online and helping and creating sort of local neighborhoods and communities and co-living spaces and so on. But I'm thinking we should also try to set up a special jurisdiction. And this is for Niklas Anzinger to come and take over. Oh, actually, no, sorry. I'm going to also talk a bit about the first experiment we've done with Zuzalu. So we brought together 200 residents for 2 months in Montenegro. And we kind of thought about this first experiment. 500 visitors as well. It was initiated by Vitalia Buterin, thinking about this sort of one-step order of magnitude change from going not like a conference that is a few thousand people or a few hundred people for a few days, but rather 8 weeks, right? So it's, I'd say, one order of magnitude in time. Also, not like co-living spaces, which is just a few people, maybe 24 people, rather 200 people, or a few hundred in total. So just as a first stepping stone towards a new city or network state. And we really kind of, I think, so it was the best time of my life for me. It was really wholesome. We really kind of started on a super bold vision, and vibes really matter. We brought people in very close proximity in a resort, and you kind of felt safe to launch a new project, to collaborate on ideas and so on. We had the weekly town halls and started establishing a great, And also, of course, very important, healthy ritual. We had the daily cold plunges, sauna, exercising together, creating accountability for working out, eating healthy. We had one healthy restaurant with our own menu inspired by Brian Johnson. And we tracked our biomarkers, including continuous glucose monitors, cooked together, and so on. And we really integrated with the Montenegro community. We talked to the government. We have there Vitalik with the former prime minister of Montenegro, the new leader of the party that won the election recently, probably the new prime minister, and I'm excited that we could potentially create a special economic zone there. So now Niklas is coming to, he's a specialist on special economic zones, so he can tell you more about that, what comes for the future.
Thank you, Laurence. So what Zuzalu proved was that you can bring highly aligned people together at a number of like 100 or 200 and create community, create density, and create urgency to change the world. That was really what Zuzalu proved to me. So I found great friends that now are all over the world, that are here, and that have the alignment to do more with it. But how can we make this something more permanent? How can we sort of use, you know, different kinds of legal system in the real, in the physical world? So here's where I come in with a model that's proven, right? The model of special economic zones. So one that's very well known is Dubai. So Dubai came from a poor desert into a wealthy megacity in less than 30 years, right? Same as for Shenzhen, China, right? So few people know this, but China started modernizing and become wealthy by looking first at Hong Kong and then asking themselves, could we do that here? And the first testing ground was Shenzhen. And then Shenzhen was taking off, right? And then they said, all right, we're going to do this all over China. So this is a proven economic development model, sort of give a small region legal autonomy, because, you know, reforming the entire country is just too hard, too many entrenched interests. So special economic zones are surprisingly common. There's thousands of special economic zones around the world. Right? In Asia, they're really common. China is full of special economic zones. Almost all their economic development takes place in these zones. Right? They differ, right? So most special economic zones don't have a high degree legal autonomy. They have like tax exemptions or like for export processing and manufacturing and things like that. And there is already an industry that is using that model, right? So I created this map just to collect what I found the most ambitious and exciting projects in the space that are building new cities, that are developing communities, that plans to build new cities or jurisdictions, that is using existing space to form different ways of living together. So this is kind of a new emerging industry. It's really not a thing, hasn't been really a thing before Balaji Srinivasan's The Network State and Vitalik Buterin kind of inspired it to be a bigger meme or trend. So during Zuzalu, we were asking ourselves what could be the place or places where we could get a higher degree, where we could get legal autonomy to advance in medical innovation, right? So we were agreeing from the beginning, it doesn't have to be one place, right? Maybe it can be multiple places. And the places that we looked at one was Montenegro, right? So, but of course they're new in the government, right? They still need to set up those zones. We also know that Uruguay has special economic zones that are very far-reaching in their legal autonomy, and many are focused on biopharma. So, and also we had a longer list of other jurisdictions. I was just visiting Zanzibar, right? So I just came back a couple of days ago, where there's more special economic zones and the government is quite open to that. But there's really one jurisdiction that stood out to us, which is Honduras. And I'm going to spend a bit of time talking about why we chose Honduras as a launch pad to explore the foundation for Vitalia. It's not a made decision, right? It's just a first camp, similar to Zuzalu, that we chose Honduras for. But it's a bottom-up community decision, after all, and from there we can look into other jurisdictions as well. So, and the reason for that is the progress that Prospera has made. Right, so Prospera, some of you know, is a special economic zone in Honduras. It's on a beautiful island called Roatán. And Honduras, what's special about Honduras is it has the special economic zones with the deepest legal autonomy possible anywhere. Prospera has really, I think, is the most advanced one in building a different legal system. And it's a deep, deep rabbit hole, right? I've written long articles about it. I have a podcast with 60 episodes that is talking about that. Also at 2 p.m. we do a 1-hour deep dive into the Prospera regulatory system and how we're using it for medical innovation. But just for example, you can be crypto native. You know, property rights can be on the blockchain. They can even be 3D and in the air, like even in 4D and more in wavelengths for frequencies for telecoms. And the core to it is that regulatory flexibility and potential for medical freedom, basically. It's in a very good location. It's pretty easy to get there, right? So it has direct flights from 6 major US airports. Right? It also is an island with an existing population. Most of the island is English speaking, right? So it is, and I've made great friends there. And it has a very strong local support. 65% of people that live there are Hondurans. I'm a resident there. I'm very proud of that. I plan to live at least 6 to 8 months in a year there together with my wife. I think we can play a video. Maybe we can do that in the workshop later. Or can we? Actually, yeah, we can. No audio. But I just wanted to give the visuals across, actually, just so you see how it looks like, because it's quite gorgeous. So this is the construction process of the Duna Tower. This is conferences that I've been organizing there. The circular factory, construction workshop.
Prospera partners with global leaders in architecture and urban development to build new cities.
That's fine.
Creating transformative investment opportunities. Our platform is currently powering the next gen. Play it back again so they can hear it from the beginning.
I don't think there's audio. But the point I want to get across with this video is that it's open for business. It exists. It has the capacity to have a couple of hundred people, but it has a very developed existing infrastructure. So it is, and it has even very high-end facilities, right? So it's such as this one, the Beach Club, right? So they bought a ready-made golf resort. They didn't build that themselves, but they did build the neighboring Duna Tower, a better building, co-working space. So it's great to host and have space for that first city, right? So here's a view from it, an aerial view. So that's all of that is included, except for some of the stuff on the horizon. But there's plenty of space to build a new city or a longevity district within that city. Right? And it's perfectly suited, and we could already point at success cases for medical innovation. So the pioneer is MiniCircle, which is a company that does reversible gene therapies. I think many of you in the community know them, McDavis and Walter Patterson. They did phase 1 clinical trials on Roatán with 44 patients. I know some patients are actually in the audience or at this conference who've done it. And they're under supervision by the GARM Stem Cell Clinic, led by an experienced American physician. So it's even compatible and interoperable with the FDA pipeline in the United States. Right? We can't go all the way, right? So stage 2 and 3 yet to be seen. But stage 1 is already saving MiniCircle 95 to 99% of the cost. And that's an enormous advantage. It gives them more pipeline to develop new drugs and therapies. Also, medical tourism, right? So you've seen it's connected with direct flights from Miami, from Houston, from Dallas. So that's just a tremendous opportunity to make this a place where people can get the most advanced longevity medical treatments in the world. So this is why we chose Prospera as a launchpad, and you're the first audience that hears about this. So we chose this conference to unveil this ambitious plan. So our idea is we want to show it to you, right? So we want to show it to you. We want to do workshops where we understand the regulatory and the legal system better, where we explore the possibility of setting up and creating infrastructure, development, doing more clinical trials. The clinic has probably about capacity for 15 to 20 clinical trials per year. Right, so we can bring more of our friends to do trials, and also we're developing our own regulatory system, right? So we can prove that we can do it better, sort of as safe or even safer, while faster and more efficient, right? So the point is not to do no regulation, the point is to do it better, and we have to be very conscious of that. So you can go to the website with this link, Vitalia City, And again, it's not a ready-made decision, it's an invitation. It's an invitation to co-create the city together with you. This is a bottom-up decision. Prospera is just the first launch pad. We want to show it to you and take that as a first opportunity to maybe branch out to other jurisdictions, because maybe we can do things in Uruguay faster, right? Maybe because existing developments there are really helpful. Maybe it turns out that Costa Rica, it's much easier to get people there for medical tourism, right? That's all fine, right? It's a journey to use the model of special economic zones to rapidly accelerate the development of longevity treatments, drugs and therapies. And I think it's necessary because I don't see another way, right? So if it costs hundreds of millions and takes decades to develop new drugs and bring them to market, it's just very hard to make that work, right? And it's also hard to sustain momentum. I think momentum is something that we shouldn't underestimate, right? So momentum is when you have a meme, and when you have a meme, then you can create a pipeline with more talent and more capital that enters your space, right? And then we can really accelerate. And I think this is the best solution, or one solution, that I want to invite you all to take part in. So thanks so much for your attention thus far. I'm pretty sure you have tons of questions, so please don't be shy with any questions, scrutinize it. I know there's a lot out there and questions that are, oh yeah, there, okay, yeah.
Thank you. My background is in global citizenship and citizenship by investment and residency. And what really intrigues me about this concept is how can, in what jurisdictions, if I was to join Vitalia or Presencia, would I be able to gain residency? And, or is it possible for these zones to grant an SSI or some form of residency that would, that I could acquire through some form of investment or contribution to that state?
Perfect question, because it already exists in Prospera, right? So that already exists. You can even be a tax resident there. I'm going to be a tax resident there. By the way, at 2 p.m., we're going to do a deep dive workshop for 1 hour on Prospera and on mini-circle clinical trials, where we talk about that question. So what are the taxes, what are the resident options and all that?
Yeah, also Hong Kong also has I think, the most autonomy there, right? They can create their own passports. We probably don't need that, but most of the discussions we have with governments, including Montenegro, they do want to at least provide residency and a path to citizenship for the country.
Montenegro I also liked because Montenegro does something that Prospera even can't do yet, because they're thinking of expedited visa approval through giving organizations such as Zuzalu or Vitalia, if we build a special economic zone, that we can grant visas, right? And that's massive, right? So for medical tourism, treating people that have hard time getting visa access. So that's why we should absolutely not forget about Montenegro, and also give other innovators in the space the chance to, well, give us something that makes all this possible.
I have such a question. So in this country, the quality of life is very low, the salaries are very low, and I suppose there will be the locals with very low salaries, with very low quality of life. They will be going to this city, for some, maintenance work, like, janitors, I don't know. And they will be coming back and they will be comparing their quality of life and the quality of life in this city. And do you think about, how to say, the perception that it will be like people will be thinking about this project as the project that increase inequality, like, the wealthy people, the wealthy white people, make ideal, city for ourselves and, use the advantage of us, poor people.
Yeah, I mean, what I can say is that that's just not a true perception, right? Again, 65% of people who live there are Hondurans. Right? Yes, there are service workers who work as janitors, of course, but there's also, half of them are educated Hondurans from the mainland who studied to be lawyers. They studied in the United States. And what they told me is, hey, this is my alternative to going to the United States, to a place where I have opportunity. And the greatest thing about it is I can do it in my own country and lift my own country up. Right? So why I'm so bullish on Prospera is because it has that very strong local grounding. Right? And it can we have a chance to not repeat the mistakes that others have made, right? So it's not going to be an enclave for rich people. That's just not at all what it is.
Hi, I wanted to thank Laurence Ion for bringing up the concept that there should be classifications of drugs that haven't made it all the way through so that self-experimenters or people who volunteer can choose to dose themselves with things that haven't made it all the way through. Legendary Pharmaceuticals has so far resurrected a couple of experimental compounds that have been through FDA safety trials, but then ran out of money and never made it through efficacy trials or final approval. And if people want to talk to me out in the hallway later on, I can say more about it.
Yeah, this is a key point. For example, Minicircle, I think, raised 3.5 million. That's not enough usually to make a phase 1 trial. They can do 6 phase, then they've done 1 or 2 already, 6 phase 1 trials with that money that they raised. So there's a lot of things that are not possible in the current paradigm of taking 15 years and billions of dollars to bring a drug to market. When you make it much cheaper, you allow things that weren't possible before to be done.
Hi, I have a question about, have you talked to the local governments about what the perspective might be in case you run some risky clinical trials and you have some sort of PR nightmare where serious side effects happen and there's a lot of bad press? Have you acknowledged that risk with the regulators in the area?
Yeah, I mean, the truth is we're going to be measured by 100 times higher standard than the status quo. That's just the truth. That's just how any startup is going to be measured, right? So there can be all sorts of people dying under FDA clinical trials or whatever, or we get bad drugs or something like that, or invisible graveyard. If there's one mistake that happens when we do it, there will be a big public disaster. We have to be conscious of that, right? So we have to be extremely diligent in making sure what we do is ethically correct and it has the proper safeguards built in, right? That's our only chance. And I'm not saying that there's no risk that something can go wrong, of course, right? But we have to prove that we can do it safer, better, and more effective than what's currently the case.
Hi, it's a very exciting idea. I just want to ask a very uncomfortable brass tacks question real quick. It's 2 questions. One, what do you consider needed investment to MVP? And 2, what is your definition of PMF in terms of a run rate going forward over the next 5-10 years?
You mean for Vitalia?
For the whole project of the actual settlement
Yeah.
as you've posed here.
So Vitalia is our project, right? So Prospera is separate from that, right? So Prospera has collected, I think, 100 million in funding or something like that, right? A Series B. So that is already a going thing. It has already several hundreds of residents, I think 1,000 something. So, and Vitalia is our project, right? So we just want to build on top of the Prospera platform.
Vitalia, your project.
So the question is about Vitalia and how much? Yeah, so for the MVP, the MVP is basically that 2-month camp, and we're going to roughly base it off of the cost of Zuzalu, but we can do it much cheaper because actually that place is much cheaper than Montenegro, right? So we're thinking about something in the probably a bit below 1 million, probably above 500K for that MVP, and to show, hey, we're able to prove we're getting a highly aligned community together, and the proof will be something like there's already clinical trials that come out of it, there's already existing therapies or drug development, there's some real traction that comes out of our ability to bring people together.
So this is just the first longevity pop-up city experiment in Prospera, and most of the money is going to come from residents. They will pay $3,000 a month for the 2 months. And that's the base rate, and I think most of the funding that we are putting there is to subsidize people that cannot afford it. But of course we will need billions of dollars to build an actual city long term, and it doesn't have to be one place, it's an archipelago of multiple locations. Again, most people will just be online, and some people will move to some places. Very few, I think, that really think it's life and death will move to one of these special jurisdictions.
Yeah.
But I hope to see how many of you, actually let me just ask this first, how many of you are thinking that this is ambitious and worth going for, and would you actually, if you think this is gonna change a significant significantly change the trajectory of our field, would you move to a new place? Okay, good to know. Thank you.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, even if you wouldn't fully move like full time, that's also okay, right? I mean, again, the magic of Zuzalu is we're like a nomadic tribe that's popping up all over the world. Also, you can still work there. Like Minicircle spends like 2 months a year there, right, and working on their clinical trials, bringing people, and then living the rest of the time in Austin, right? So I think the future, the network state, is a world where we're more mobile, right, where we're more flexible, where our life is more unbundled, right? So I think that's a great future to look forward to.
Thank you so much. I was wondering more about the logistics of how clinical trials and medical tourism are going to work. So, you know, what is the mechanism for doing due diligence on clinical trials? Where do the study subjects come from? And as far as medical tourism goes, obviously it's great for people to be able to take, you know, experimental things that haven't taken 15 years to go through the FDA. But, you know, what do you do to make sure that there aren't like 1,000 snake oil products that people are going to have to figure out what's real and what's not?
Yeah, I mean, again, so we do a 1-hour deep dive on exactly that question, where you can diligence all of that. The short answer is we're basically not doing the safety trials, at least, differently. I think under any reasonable regulatory system, you'd have safety trials, right? And you know, these aren't the most expensive, but there's still tons of bureaucracy to cut, right? So they're under a clinic that has an IRB, right? So they're authorized to have oversight over trials, and the data is collected in an FDA-compliant way. So afterwards, stage 2 and 3 and 4 trials, we can then also do elsewhere. So that's the short answer on that. And on medical tourism and making sure, again, that's where we go very deep in the 1-hour workshop.
And it's more about providing this platform for a certificatory approach, a new approach. And of course, if you're going to make a drug and give it to someone, you probably want insurance because you might get sued or side effects, right? So insurance companies then can become competitive instead of monopolistic regulators, right? They say, look, I'm going to insure you if you follow this checklist, and I'm going to lower your premiums if you do even more, and so on.
Right. Thank you. I'm curious, another tough question. Roatán is a beautiful place. It's a nice island. They speak English, no less. But it's in Honduras, and the government of Honduras has not always been the most stable. Has Prospera or has anybody really taken steps to ensure that their investment in Roatán will not be co-opted when a government changes, either democratically or more possibly undemocratically, and they just walk in and say, wow, what a beautiful city, thank you very much, get out of here?
So the short answer to that is there is an unstable political situation, right? Honduras is not a stable or good, well-governed country. Right now there is a hostile government in power, right? But the legal architects of the ZE law have put extremely strong safeguards in place. Right now they're being a bit battle-tested. We're very close to coming through it, right, without any significant damage. But you know, that will be part of the informed consent education to everyone, right? It's not that things are unsafe, right? The island is super, super safe, right? But there is kind of a, you know, headlines that can come from Honduras, whatever kind of situation. But this is also why for any future network state, we want to be diversified, right? So if we have 3 locations, if there's like an unstable government situation in one, we can then still move to the other, right? But our thinking was that if Honduras succeed, and I will still put the chance very, very high, then we get the most that we've ever gotten, right? So there's a tremendous upside if we can make it work, if we get sort of a place or a jurisdiction in Prosper to do what we want to do, because the depth of the medical autonomy that we can work with and the flexibility of developing a new regular system is just completely unprecedented. So I think that's why we want to use it also as a base, and then also sort of learn from that example how we can get something similar to that in other jurisdictions as well, to become kind of a diversified longevity network state.
One key aspect there is relocation insurance. I really am starting to love the idea of insurance. It's kind of like the OG community coming together for the common good, and OG DAO. So you can get people to pay premiums, and in case there's a problem, the government is hostile or so on, then they get paid out to basically move to a new location, buy a new house somewhere, right? And so some of the money from the premiums can actually be used to lobby the government, and we have models in which we give a direct dividend to the citizens of the host country, and of course higher paid jobs and so on to incentivize them to be a mutually beneficial relationship.
All right, well, thank you very much, Niklas, Laurence. We're right now currently on our lunch break, so.
See you in 1 hour, I hope. Thank you.
It's a fascinating topic, autonomous zones. And when we come back from lunch at 2 o'clock, we'll be starting our panel discussion on biomarkers.